The transfers just keep on coming for Lance Leipold and KU football.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, at Derek Johnson on Blue Sky, and this is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every show. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts and on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, 3 more transfer portal additions for KU football. We'll also at the end touch on a little bit. They also added a player from the high school ranks, and they lost their starting punter. So we'll get into all that on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by College Football Playoff on TNT. It's finally here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff, presented by Allstate, begins with 4 first-round games, December 20th and December 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. Check it out. Okay, we're going to start up with Joseph Sipp. He's a linebacker from Bowling Green. Then we'll get to DJ Graham, the corner from Utah State and Oklahoma. Finish up with Tyler Mercer, and then a little bit on the kicker-punter situation with Damon Greaves leaving for KU on this episode of the show. Joseph Sipp Jr., he is a 6', 225-pound linebacker from Tampa, Florida. Went to Hillsborough High School. He's going to be transferring in from Bowling Green. Low-key, Bowling Green was a real good MAC team this season. You might look at the record, I think 7-5 this year, but they played a couple real teams in Texas A&M and Penn State. So they were a very talented MAC squad, and he ended up playing 12 games as a true freshman with 1 start in the 2022 season. He had 13 games with 12 starts in the 2023 season, and then he had 12 starts in 2024, which means he will be a true senior in 2025 with 37 games played and 25 career game starts under his belt to his name to this point in time. So experienced player. He had a good year this year, 75 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. What that tells me is he's a linebacker who can make chaotic plays happen, that he can has a good read of what gaps to go through or where to make the big play. You don't end up with 10.5 TFLs or 6 sacks as a linebacker without having those good instincts. And also 2 pass deflections, fumble recovery, ended up earning all MAC first team. So that's clearly an indication of what some of the other people around the league think of him. In total for his career, 167 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 2 pass deflections, and a fumble recovery. This season, he had 5 games with 7 or more tackles. He had at least a half TFL in 8 of the games, and he had multiple tackles for loss in 3 of the games. You look at the Pro Football Focus grades, Sipp ended up with a 68 overall grade among MAC linebackers who had at least 500 snaps this season. He is ranked 11th of the 22 who would qualify there, so kind of middle of the pack if you're looking at that. But again, on a good Bowling Green team. And what I think is most impressive for me when I look at some of the Pro Football Focus grades for Sipp is that he's just balanced across the grades. Sometimes you see guys, he's a 65 grade, he's a 70 in this, but he's only a 55 in this. That's not really the case for Sipp. He is a 66 graded in run defense, 70 grade in tackling, 68 grade in pass rush, and a 65 grade in coverage. And as we've talked about, that kind of 60 to 69 range on PFF, that's just like, you're just kind of average starter level. The closer you get to 70, the better that is, right? It's just so valuable. Like, if he can be well-rounded as a linebacker, and we don't entirely know what KU is going to do under DK McDonald. Are they going to stick with kind of the 4-3? Is it going to be more of a 4-2-5 system? Is that 5th player, so to speak? Is that an extra safety? Is it an extra corner? Is it more of a hawk-type role where it basically is a linebacker that just has better coverage skills? Like, what is that position going to look like? What is the formation under DK McDonald? How is that going to be for KU? But you look at it, and regardless of if you're playing that, regardless if you're playing a dime defense, even in substitution defenses, you still have at least a linebacker out there. And so you need a linebacker you can trust to stay on the field for 3 downs. In a lot of cases, you need at least 2 linebackers you can trust to stay on the field for 3 downs. I think you look at that with Bengali Kamara and with Joseph Sipp as possibly being those guys. Now, I will say, even though the coverage grade comes in as 65 for Sipp, the numbers don't look as good He was targeted 36 times and gave up 30 catches. That's an 83% completion rate. For his career, he has been targeted 60 times in coverage and allowed 48 catches. That's an 80% completion rate on what is a 105.3 NFL passer rating against. So that's kind of my worry, is that what if he is kind of toast in coverage? But then again, as a linebacker, sometimes the completions you can give up are, what if it's a swing route? What if it's a screen to the running back that you're technically the closest defender? Of course, that's going to raise the completion rate kind of against you. So I don't entirely know what to think there. Like, is he just a first and second down linebacker who, with the jump in competition and athleticism, not going to be much of a third down guy? Or is some of those well-rounded PFF grades, does that indicate he can stay on the field for all three downs? And if you are continuing to worry about it, you might look to the two games he played. I mentioned they played Penn State and Texas A&M. He only had a 51 overall grade against Penn State. He only had a 48 grade against Texas A&M. Now, he only missed 2 tackles in those 2 games combined, which, ideally you're not missing any, or you're only missing 1. But, even KU linebackers are missing tackles around 15% of the time. And maybe you could view that as, okay, he actually was a good tackler against the good athletes. That's good. You could also view it as maybe he just didn't miss as many because he couldn't get there in time because he wasn't as athletic to do so. But that would be the worry. The jump up in athleticism, how is that going to affect him as the linebacker? But still, the way I view it right now in the linebacker room, I mentioned Bengali Kamara. The way I view it, like on paper right now, Bengali Kamara, probably KU's best linebacker. He'll be a redshirt senior, the transfer from, South Carolina, before that Pitt. You have Jason Gilliam back, who I think has shown flashes throughout his career, but has never really fully stayed healthy. And hopefully that's something he can do this year. And then you have a bunch of young guys, like you have Tristan Fletcher, who seemed to make some inroads last year, but we didn't really get to see on the field a ton. He's a redshirt senior, so I don't know really what to expect there. And then, like I said, you have a ton of young guys who would are any of them going to take a jump this year? Because even if one of them takes a jump, I think that'd be huge. Logan Brantley will be a redshirt sophomore. Ja'Cory Stewart and Jonathan Kamara, who's just a freak athlete, are going to be redshirt freshmen. And then you have a true freshman, Malachi Kirby. Can one of your young linebackers, basically one of those 4, Kirby, Brantley, Stewart, and Kamara, can one of them take a jump up that they can supplant this starting group of linebackers? But I think right now, I'd almost view Sipp as being the second best linebacker on KU, right? Even if you do have certain questions, I think the production, the experience, the things that he can do, I think sometimes, I myself do this, others do this, focus too much on the things they can't do when we should focus on things they can do. And the things he can do will probably make him one of the more productive linebackers on KU. And certainly things worked out well when you got JB Brown from Bowling Green. So you go back to that well, get Sipp. And if I'm projecting the starting linebacker lineup right now, I would imagine KU is still going to be searching for even more in the transfer portal. Because, if you have basically 8 guys right now, you probably have room to add another scholarship player or so. But I would be projecting probably Bengali Kamara and Joseph Sipp to be your 2 starting linebackers. If you do have kind of a Hawk starting linebacker, that would be more of the Jason Gilliam. And then, like I said, if one of those young players makes a jump, they become the first linebacker rotates in. And we saw this year really with, 3 linebackers mainly for those 2 main spots, the non-Hawk spot, right? Jason Gilliam, Alex Reich, Marvin Grant, those guys were kind of splitting the Hawk spots. But for the 2 regular linebacker spots, it was basically mostly Cornell Wheeler when he was healthy and JB Brown, and then they rotated in Taiwan Berryhill. So who are those 3 going to be this year? Right now, my money would be on Bengali Kamara, Joseph Sipp, and then again, if you're using Gilliam as more of a Hawk, then maybe it's Tristan Fletcher. You just go with the seniority. But honestly, my money might be on that it would be adding another player out of the transfer portal, because this position is one that KU certainly has room to improve this season. All right, let's continue on. KU also added a corner, former 4-star recruit from Oklahoma and Utah State. We'll discuss D. Graham. Has that ever worked before, D. Graham at Kansas? We'll discuss that next. Our episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. This episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks, the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million members and sign up today. They invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out of your lineup if it isn't perfect. You can even double your money if one of your picks doesn't hit. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. Thanks. James Cook is going to get more than 60 yards next week, or Joe Burrow more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. Cook up hot takes with your friends, share them, and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off instantly, or $50, instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Continuing on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, KU's next portal commit. I mean, they are rolling in portal commits, double digits at this point in time. Lance Leipold continuing to kill it, and staff on the recruiting trail. Let's talk a little DJ Graham, who is a corner who was most recently at Utah State. Before that, he was at Oklahoma. Before that, he was at Keller Central High School in Fort Worth, Texas. He's a 6 foot, 200-pound corner, was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, goes to Oklahoma for 4 seasons. He had 28 games played, 12 starts for the Sooners before his most recent year at Utah State. But because of the 2020 COVID year, and then he took a medical redshirt in 2023, he's going to be a 6th-year senior in 2025 with 1 season left. And it's a very interesting path here for DJ Graham. So he comes into college in 2020 as that 4-star. He plays 8 games. He has 1 start, 21 tackles, 1 TFL, and interception, pass breakup as a true freshman. Had a 74 PFF grade in 240 snaps. Then he plays 12 games with 10 starts. He actually missed the KU game that year in 2021, so KU didn't get to go against him and see him up close and personal in what would have been the first year of the Lance Leipold era in 2021. But he ended up with 37 tackles, an interception, a forced fumble, 2 pass breakups. PFF grade went down a little bit, 62.3. Snaps went way up to 557. That tends to be, it can be easier to play better in a smaller role. Maybe you have more energy to do. Maybe you have less to focus on, right? There's certain reasons that stuff can kind of happen. And, you look at his first year, he was playing most of his snaps in the corner. That was still kind of the same thing in year 2, but he did get a little bit more snaps in the box and kind of around the line of scrimmage. So I don't know. Then 2022, 6 games played. He had 1 starter corner, 14 tackles, 2 pass breakups, 57 PFF grade. But they ended up moving him to receiver, midway through the season. And then he played some special teams, played some receiver, didn't, register all these stats or anything, but he comes into the 2023 season in the spring game as a wide receiver. And he had a couple catches for 74 yards in the spring game. To where it was like, oh, this guy might have something. Clearly, he's a very good athlete, but he ends up missing the whole 2023 season with injury. Then he transfers to Utah State. He goes for 42 tackles this year, 2 pass deflections, 3 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions. He had a 69.4 PFF grade in 671 snaps. It was a 52 in run defense, a 63 in tackling, 77 in coverage. That was by far the best grade of his career in coverage. And the 9th best among Mountain West cornerbacks that are qualified here. There were 41 qualified Mountain West cornerbacks in terms of the number of snaps, and that ended up being the case for him. And again, played most of his snaps at corner. He did get some, kind of in the box or in the slot a little bit, or kind of at the line of scrimmage. But it'll be interesting to see how KU kind of uses him. Are they going to use him more in that third corner role as a slot guy? Are they going to use him on the outside? What is going to be the game plan here for using him when you have already another transfer coming in Jaleel Hurley? You have some interesting young pieces in the program already, right? You think of some guys coming back. And what's interesting here with Graham, he's an awesome athlete. He had, you might go back, just look up DJ Graham interception versus Nebraska. It's an incredible, like Odell Beckham type interception. The question I think here is this, because clearly the grades at Utah State are good. Was that just because he was athletically dominant over people in the Mountain West? Or was it that he was getting better, right? With experience, you tend to get better. Or is it maybe just a little bit of both? Whereas you look to maybe some past moments where, yeah, he had some good when he was at Oklahoma in the Big 12. He also had some struggles. Do you view that as when athletes were more up to his caliber, he struggled a little bit more? Do you also just view that as Oklahoma's defenses tended to be a mess for the most part when he was there, right? Most of those years, I don't know about most, but a couple of those years are with Lincoln Riley as that coach when they didn't have good defenses. Some of that could be that. Some of that could just be that he got better this year. Some of it could be the athleticism thing. But if it is just the athleticism thing, like he did play USC this year, and he had a 73.6 grade against USC. He had a 74 coverage grade in that game specifically. And so I had him described to me by an OU fan as kind of a playmaking corner, which is kind of right up the alley of what you had with Mello Dotson and Kobe Bryant. Now, obviously, some of these numbers are dependent to scheme, to play calling, to what's being asked of you. What is weird, he allowed a 67% completion rate. That's not ideal, but he also allowed just 6.8 yards per attempt. That is ideal. What's also interesting, he hasn't been a guy who gets penalized a ton either. So, that's obviously a good thing. He did allow 4 passing touchdowns. That's not great, but he also did get 2 interceptions. So I think some things on both ends. And if you're going to go into this, like, can he be a full replacement for Mello Dotson or Kobe Bryant? Like, I don't think that's how we should evaluate this, because the answer is probably going to be no. Can he be a serviceable starter for you, whether that's as the first, second, or third corner? Yeah, I think that's very much in the world of possibilities. But that will become a question, because I think there's a lot of competition in that corner room for KU. Jalen Todd moving into a sophomore year. Really liked what we saw at the end of his season as a freshman. Demarius McGee will be a redshirt senior, former really talented guy. And he got a little bit of run earlier this season, but didn't necessarily jump off when he was out there. And I think was maybe dealing with some injury stuff. Jaleel Hurley, the former top 50 recruit you just brought in from Alabama. I think Jameel Croft and Jacoby Davis now in year 3, redshirt sophomores, like they're clearly very talented guys. Like, can they make that jump this next year? I think Austin Alexander, somebody people are really high on as redshirt freshman. You also got Andre Gibson as a redshirt freshman. Chris McCorkle is a freshman. The way I view it right now, like I would almost be thinking your top 3 corners are going to be Jalen Todd, DJ Graham, Demarius McGee. The question is, who's your starting 2 on the outside? Who's your slot guy? But I am open to the idea that one of those does get usurped by Jaleel Hurley, Jameel Croft, or Austin Alexander. I think it is going to be tight competition all the way throughout. I don't think Kansas needs to add another guy in the portal at this position. Maybe they will. It seemed like they were interested in a lot of different corners. So maybe that tells you that they are interested in bringing in 2 guys, and maybe that, some of those young guys aren't as far along as they might hope to play at least this year, and they want to give them another year to kind of figure things out. I don't know. That kind of remains to be seen. But I do think Graham is somebody who I would view to be one of KU's top 3 corners, if not top 2, if not your number 1 corner. But I almost think that, like, it behooves you better if you're a defense. If DJ Graham is your number 2 corner, I don't know. I kind of view that as being a better situation for you. Okay, let's finish up. KU added an offensive lineman as well in Tyler Mercer. This episode of the show is brought to you by the College Football Playoff on TNT. It is that time of the year. The College Football Playoff's back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you the all-new, hard-hitting, and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup. The SMU Mustangs against the Penn State Nittany Lions. That'll be at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern, so 3 o'clock Central Time here. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate. You can catch it live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Get ready for those Impractical Jokers commercials. Finishing up on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks with, we'll touch a little bit on the special team stuff. Damon Greaves entering the portal, but Tyler Mercer is the other latest addition for KU. He is a 6'4", 290-pound interior offensive lineman, originally from Prosper, Texas, came into North Texas. Shout out Bucky's as an 85 graded 3-star recruit. He is really impressive. He played in 8 games with 6 starts, including the final 5 games as an interior offensive lineman. And he's going to be a true sophomore when you look at this upcoming season with 3 seasons left to play. Now, you look at now all 3 of KU football's offensive line positions. 2 of them are tackles. This one, an interior guy. But what's interesting is all of them played as true freshmen and have 3 seasons left to play with a 4th if you redshirt them a year. But at the same point in time, I almost think Mercer is the least likely to end up redshirting. Now, you look at him, 565 snaps, all of them came at the center position this season. And that's where things become interesting. And the PFF grade's good, 68.5 PFF grade as a true freshman. And that's for a bowl-eligible North Texas team. He had an 80 grade in pass blocking. How do you do that? He only allowed 3 pressures all season. That's really impressive. 63 in run block. So, it's not even like, oh, the run block was really bad and the pass block was great. Like, the run block was adequate. The pass block was great. Really good production there. And obviously Bryce Foster is coming back for another season. So you're going to pencil in Bryce Foster as being your starting center. What does that mean for Mercer? I think you could view it a couple ways. One, if KU views that he needs more time, he becomes the backup center. Maybe he's the backup center and the backup guard, right? Maybe he's just used as a backup in a lot of ways, and then you're setting him up to be a future starter as soon as 2026. Maybe you're able to, by having him as a backup, as the backup center, maybe you're able to keep him down to just 4 games played, and he's able to redshirt, right? And then he's even more of a future piece. Or what if even he is the backup center, but he starts at guard? Because the way you view it right now, with the KU returning offensive starters on the offensive line, it's Kobe Baines and it's Bryce Foster. And then if you want to add Calvin Clemens, who we've seen start games, then that would be 3 guys. But that would leave a tackle position open. That would leave a guard position open, right? Do you think, he can take that guard position? I think that's entirely possible, right? Obviously, it'll depend how you adjust to playing against bigger, stronger, faster athletes and everything, and that's going to be a big part of it. But the way you view it is you might have gotten your starting center of the future and possibly even a starting guard as soon as this year. That would be a pretty big deal. All right, KU did lose someone today. That was Damon Greaves, who was a sophomore in 2024 at the punter position. Did improve from year 1 to year 2, went from like 39 yards per punt to 42 yards per punt. But Kansas went from last in the Big 12 in yards per punt, second to last in yards per punt. So like they did improve, but it wasn't like this gigantic improvement. So I say that to say this isn't an insurmountable replacement. Obviously he was showing to get better, and he probably will be even better this next season. I believe he is 24 years old, so maybe the curve isn't as much there. Obviously, contributed in a solid way for KU, and that was an unfortunate story with his parents coming all the way out to see him play, and then he didn't end up punting. So I don't know if that contributed to him wanting to leave at all, but that only leaves Graydon Addison as the lone punter on the roster, I believe, right now for KU. So obviously they're going to have to go out and get somebody. But I should also mention they added Dane Efrid. He's a kicker from Branson High School in Missouri. I believe that'll be a preferred walk-on for KU. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Apologies for the little camera issue there. This has been LOJ. Catch us on another edition with Nick Schwerdt on tomorrow's episode and a KU Brown preview on Friday. See you then.